Sorry, thank you. We are good to begin with the next session of our Unido Talks, where the topic of today is how blockchain can help in mitigating financial and data authenticity risk. Today we have our guest, Andrei Popescu. Please, can you help me pronounce the name? Andrei
Popescu. You are super
perfect.
right. Very good.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Who is the founder and CEO at SCX Holdings. Andrei, can you please help us with maybe a small introduction about yourself and like what SCX Holdings is about and what you're doing there?
Sure. So my name is Andrei Popescu, if you really wanted to know my exact full name. I'm Romanian, but living in Singapore. With regards to my background, so I have 2 bachelor's degrees, one in computer science, the other one in management, with a master's degree in business management, and now I'm a PhD student researching financial digital assets, and more specifically crypto assets. So I'm classifying them as a new asset class and bridging them with the traditional finance world, right? I consider myself a vision-driven entrepreneur, and I've been always focusing on novel and innovative business concepts. I've been fascinated by crypto assets for a very long time, actually from 2014. And as a result, I've co-founded one of the first cryptocurrency exchange originating from Singapore. My journey into fintech and financial digital assets, basically combined with strategic investments and quantitative algo trading, consolidated in a new venture which is called SCX Holdings. I have founded SCX Holdings in 2018. And it's an alternative asset management company, as you are dealing with cryptos, with a focus on disruptive technologies and of course, digital markets. So we believe that the introduction of digital assets in the financial service sector clearly will stabilize the investment landscape, and this will radically disrupt old school ways of the financial world. The minds behind SCX Holdings are a powerhouse of finance, quantitative analysis, applied mathematics, computer science, and of course, blockchain professionals. I'm very proud of my fabulous decentralized team, as we are like scattered over 4 continents. I think that's quite normal in this industry. So we have people in Australia, where you are. We have people in North America, Europe, and of course, Southeast Asia. So SCX basically is leveraging the expertise of these professional financial analysts, the investment experts, the quant developers, to create proven systems of evaluation of digital markets, of crypto assets, and of course, other traditional finance instruments. We are not limited to only crypto per se. So what we do at SCX Holdings, we apply quantitative models and techniques like symbolic regressions and genetic programming to find symbolic formulas that enclose the movement of specific markets, in our case, crypto markets. But we have developed our own trading infrastructure, which connects to exchanges and places the orders automatically based on the above mentioned models. And the system is composed of a bunch of independent strategies, which actually they don't talk to each other for hedging purposes. And we've built our own integrated portfolio manager, which is aware of all the positions, of course, across the exchanges, and know what each strategy is doing in terms of, I don't know, capital needs of its risk profile, with purpose of, I don't know, providing an overall picture of efficiency, right? In terms of performance, in terms of fees that are spent, and also risk management. So we've been working very hard on adapting artificial intelligence models into this type of systems that actually are are around the crypto markets. And basically what we offer is market intelligence tools, right? Which are powered by artificial intelligence. As I was saying, genetic programming is basically a branch of machine learning. So our platform is using this machine learning adaptation to identify and optimize algo trading, where these algorithms are continuously improving, and of course they are getting smarter. So the combination of artificial intelligence and human analyze allows us to have the best strategies for bull and bear markets, range markets, and so on. In this sense, automated data and of course automated strategies allows the users to reduce the need of the human factor. So for the last year, we've been working very hard doing research and basically developing this AI implementation. And our machine learning engine is designed to create automated trading strategies for any type of assets, from digital to traditional finance markets. So we deal with private clients, and of course we trade our own money. But we are working also on a project that will address the public, and we hope that we can launch it somewhere in Q2 of this year. So stay tuned.
Oh, that's wonderful to know. And it's good to know that you're working with the AI and the machine learning, and obviously the quant trading models, and algorithmic trading, they require like heavy sets of data. And this is this one question which always I'm curious about for the companies who are dealing with on-chain, blockchain-based data, blockchain technology, and obviously AI, because
yes,
AI and machine learning both require heavy sets of data, which many a times experts feel blockchain is incapable of handling. But blockchain has its own pros, where it improves transparency, it improves data integrity, it improves privacy, confidentiality. So can you help us please understand how blockchain is helping improve the data integrity, authenticity, data confidentiality, and if you want to touch base on how AI is also getting involved with blockchain in this space, in improving this data integrity, please, I would love to know that part.
Oh, absolutely. It's a good question, but actually to answer this, we need to go back to the basics. So clearly we need to talk about blockchain. So as you know, blockchain is a decentralized technology that eliminates the need of a central authority or intermediary. And this is in order to process or to validate or authenticate transaction in other type of data exchanges, right? So blockchain implementation does not enforce confidentiality aspects as strongly as it enforces the integrity and availability of the information stored inside it. This is an important factor to know, because you have inserted some information, some data into the blocks of the blockchain. That data cannot be changed. That data cannot be updated, and the information there is available for viewing, of course, right? So the blockchain itself, the confidentiality aspect of it is a subject of many discussions, especially in the business world, where we have all these data breaches. We have a lot of things happening because of the centralized systems, right? And these have been subjected to a lot of hacks, and resulting in increase of identity theft, of data losses, and even consumers' confidence. So blockchain, in this sense, it offers tamper-proof ability in terms of consolidating the data into the blocks, as it uses cryptographic signatures, right? So the key differentiator with blockchain is that it has wide appeal in terms of data breaches, because these things cannot happen, right? Data breaches are unlikely to happen due to decentralized nature of the data. So centralized databases are subjected to a variety of risks, right? From natural disasters, from power outages, from technology failures, be it hardware or software. And of course, the more recent ransomware attacks, right? So the distribution, the replication of the blockchain, the system itself, intend to ensure availability and the survival of the data on this ledger in case of, I don't know, something like server or nodes fail. So this new digital ledger, actually, it's a ledger of economic transaction as designed, right? Can be programmed, can be adapted to integrate all sorts of data. And we can think here of important type of data like title deeds, like birth certificates, like titles of ownership. We can talk about medical information, insurance claims, votes, and of course, anything that comes and can be expressed in code. For example, the provenance of an asset or of food, right? We go into the supply chain management side. But all these features that you're talking about, like integrity, authenticity, confidentiality, are built on the backbone of blockchain. So these are perfect use cases for the blockchain infrastructure. And because of this and the efficiency and scalability of blockchain, now we have different type of blockchains, right? We have the public blockchains, we have the distributed ledgers, we have the permission blockchains, we have the private blockchains. Each of them basically satisfies a need or a requirement for the users. We have the permissionless blockchains. So the perfect analogy for people to understand how the efficiency of this technology has evolved, I would say, is the car industry. The car industry, right? Because, for example, if you are looking for a fast car, basically you have to look at the Ferraris, you have to look at the Maseratis with very low gravity points and the aerodynamics, right? If you want to climb into the mountains, clearly you need to have a bigger car, a very powerful car with a big engine, right? If you are looking for space, clearly you are looking at SUVs, you are looking at the vans. So this is an analogy of how the industry evolves in terms of the requirements and needs of its users.
Yeah, that is a very solid point. And mostly in the blockchain industry, we keep arguing on the fact that yes, there is a trilemma about its scalability, about its throughput. And it is a very solid point that different blockchains are being built with respect to different use cases, maybe, and obviously they are targeting different sets of customers. There are blockchains which are targeting making consortiums and only within banking network, and there are blockchains which are possibly they are working towards being the Ethereum killers, or
yeah, I've heard that a lot.
Yeah,
the Ethereum killers, right?
Yeah, but the fact is that we have permission blockchains, we have permissionless blockchain. When we have permissionless blockchain, we have blockchains which are maybe not equally centralized as Bitcoin and Ethereum, but they have other advantages. So yes, there are different types of cars, there can be different types of blockchains, and obviously there can be different types of consensus mechanisms which these blockchains are built on. That's the most underlying layer where the scalability and the speed of blockchain, the speed of transactions are being determined. Again, coming to only the financial sector, we have seen. I also wrote a research paper on how blockchain can be used, in possibly making the financial reporting, auditing, accounting structure more transparent and more automated with the help of smart contracts. So there are certain financial risks involved, which leads to maybe financial fraud or maybe other types of losses. It can be with respect to financial reporting, settlement risk, financial privacy, maybe other financial operations. So, Michael, this will be my question to you, as you have worked in the senior positions of some of the largest financial institutions. So how do you feel can blockchain help in mitigating the financial risks? What are these risks? which the current centralized structures, centralized systems are posing still, and how blockchain can help mitigate them.
So in the finance world, you typically work as counterparties, right? You're a legal entity, you have responsibilities, you trade with other counterparties. So if you take proprietary trading desks which trade amongst each other, at the end of the day, it's a legal entity. So blockchain's helpful in recording a piece of data. Maybe it's an agreement you entered into, the price you entered something into, terms, those sorts of things. Or maybe you use what's becoming popular as digital IDs, use of NFTs to record someone's ID. And if they can sign on behalf of that NFT, that would imply they are that person. The issue comes down to you can't intrinsically be verified as the person purely because you own a private key to an NFT. Someone had to verify you in the first instance. It's typically a KYC provider or some sort of intermediary. So this is where you meld blockchain with the real world, and we're talking about KYC providers. They were around before they became prominent in crypto, for instance. So it's taking real world, or shall I say, traditional world services and melding blockchain solutions into what is still traditional finance constructs for the purpose of efficiency and for dependability. So the interesting thing with crypto, for instance, when you're transacting in tokens, it settles near instantly or 30 minutes later, depending on which network you're using. The network and the transferring is all very efficient, but there's two entities that had to arrange the sending, and one entity had to put in the private key to send the crypto over to another receiving entity. So it's how these two meld, which is interesting to me. And what I'd like to see, and what I keep looking for in my role with Tokenomic, for instance, looking for new projects that meld the automation that I've just talked about in the traditional sense. The KYC providers actually verify someone before that they print an NFT for them or mint an NFT, trying to automate that and bring as much of that on chain or as a transparent distributed app, for instance, instead of a business with a business service and they've got their private servers and they do all their computing and verification, and then they spit out an NFT instruction to mint an NFT, trying to bring as much of that into the distributed world as possible. I think that's sort of the next evolution you're going to see in the data integrity and information sense. It's quite common now that, NFTs are used to identify a single person, but it still relies on whomever printed it or minted it at the end of the day, what their processes were, how redundant you could form an ID, and people have this belief that you're holding an NFT. Well, it's an indisputable record on a blockchain. It is, but the authenticity of the person who printed it, who knows? So apart from, these are reputable businesses typically, I'd love to see more and more of that process brought on chain. And I think that really starts to bring the efficiency of just a record into distributed apps, which print a record, and distributed apps are typically more transparent than a black box system you can't see. And I think that keeps the financial institutions more honest in what they're doing, and there's more reliability and more belief in a financial system, rather than it's the old finance boys at the end of the day, but they print some data on a blockchain. So the more broad that we can bring in the processes of determining the data before it's recorded on a blockchain and integrating that and making that all distributed and, public architecture that you can look up, for instance, the better.
Yeah, it completely makes sense. And in the financial sector, we mostly, again, it comes to these financial institutions dealing with clients, maybe the retails, and how we are making this, again, the data more when we are dealing with financial institutions, the clients and the retail, they want the financial privacy of the data to be like intact. They don't want their transactions to be seen by everyone. And the pseudonymity of public blockchains don't allow that, but maybe permission blockchains and private blockchains, things can be implemented on a different front. On the other side, Andrew, you were just talking about deeds and intellectual properties. We have seen in many of these legal entities, the law firms, and there are startups which are trying to deal with how intellectual properties can be maybe distributed or owned with the help of blockchain, and how they can assure the authenticity of the ownership of those intellectual properties. And I think this small part goes to a wide range of sectors where the intellectual properties are being owned, even as basic as, let's say, a research paper to some maybe like a music, and that's where again NFTs come into place. So how do you think? Yeah, how
absolutely.
do you think can blockchain help in the ownership, the authentication, the transferring, the transparency of intellectual properties?
Absolutely. So just to add to what Michael just said, I totally agree with him, and all the things that are happening in the financial services sector is only a bridging and optimization of their actual services using blockchain, which makes perfect sense. But that doesn't mean that the technology itself is only financial intended. So the technology has many use cases and can be adapted exactly like you were mentioning now to a lot of business sector, because blockchain technology is used to protect information exchange. So since blockchain can ensure that data hasn't been tampered with, it holds a wide appeal to various forms of intellectual property protection. So employing blockchain technology could provide increased efficiency and authenticity in establishing ownership rights, maybe reducing counterfeits, licensing, of course, using smart contracts and registering trademarks. Actually, the idea of licensing trademarks through blockchain is very interesting, and it's appealing since it eliminates the need for a third-party involvement or any additional external support. So the contract between two parties is written in computer code, right? And it's self-executing. This is super powerful with cryptographic signature. So since we don't have any human intervention in this process, though the human intervention is removed, right, from this equation, the code automatically controls all the transactions under the contract, under the agreement itself. So for instance, the code will dictate when a royalty payment is due, when a royalty needs to be paid based on the agreement, and will send the funds, of course, automatically to the appropriate trademark holder or whoever that party is, right? On the other hand, the current IP system, with the current IP system, I believe we had a lot of flaws, right? We are able to download music, movies, books, and without having the owner, the creator of this artworks in the pictures, right? Without compensating them, right? So proving infringement becomes difficult since IP rights are not immediately registered in the existing framework. With blockchain, a creator can automatically have a timestamp on his or her work, and because of that, they can claim ownership. This is also a very impactful thing. This makes it easier for the documentation, right, which is stored in the blockchain and shows the original creator, and it's very precise with regards to the moment that artwork or that asset was created, right? So I was talking also about the counterfeit industry, right, where we have the luxury brands as a perfect example. So consumers aren't always savvy enough in terms of determining the difference between the counterfeit and an original product, right? And because of this, putting blockchain into this equation, right, can solve the part of actually tracing the authenticity of that product, right? So blockchain technology would allow the level of counterfeit goods to be policed, if I can say so, and verify the product's origin, right? So the consumers could ideally scan a code or a QR code or a tag, I don't know, a digital tag, right, to trace the origin of the goods and to verify its authenticity. So all these examples, of course, help the many business sectors, many industries. And exactly like Michael was mentioning, I think we need to talk also about the NFT part, because NFTs are very important in this scenario. And I believe what NFTs brought to this current infrastructure, to this current environment, is the part of ownership, the certificate of authenticity, and having a unique owner, besides creating the notion of digital scarcity. So digital scarcity is another notion that actually helps everything that's related to the crypto market, because it ensures and brings more more intrinsic value to the concept of supply and demand, right? Because the theory of a good which is scarce, the scarcer it is, the more valuable it is, right? So this theory and NFTs itself have brought to this ecosystem a great amount of important factors and properties. So authenticity, intellectual property rights, all these features can be embedded in the metadata of an NFT. So non-fungible tokens clearly are something that are very interesting. I'm very thrilled to be part in this to be part of this era where I see how this industry is evolving. And I'm quite sure that the NFT part will be quite big, and maybe it can actually surpass the crypto market as it is. I leave it to you.
Yeah, definitely.
An interesting point,
Yeah.
right? Especially when people struggle, or at the moment, at least the perception is you've got the valuable assets, such as the tradable tokens on exchanges. Then you've got other uses for blockchain, which hasn't got a monetized token per se, but there's a value to it. So Andrei's just talked about NFTs and capturing people's data. Well, there's immense value to the person who owns the data, especially if it's a permission token to prove who you are. Fraud is a huge problem. It's $1 billion leakage in any market. These things hold value too, and not just an NFT over artwork. You know, $180 million JPEG is worth $180 million because someone paid for it, right? Whether you think it's good, well, money well spent or not is irrelevant largely. There is a market. But then there's even the more obscure uses for recording data, which hasn't got an immediate monetary or obvious monetary value, but these are still valuable things to people. And then it comes back, and I know we bang on about this at Unido all the time, the corporate governance and the ownership around these, because as markets evolve and the monetization of people's personal information, for instance, evolves, these will be immediately valuable tokens, whether NFT or otherwise. And the custody of these things and the ownership and the valuation and the tradability of these, of people's rights, for instance. I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing, Facebook's the obvious one, but maybe that's an unfair shot. But the idea of tradable assets and people's profiles having values to them, and maybe those people can trade those values.
Absolutely.
There's plenty of examples where it's not immediately obvious that there's a monetizable element just because we haven't evolved and we haven't gotten there yet. But I think it's important that we're looking at the technology to provide the efficiency for holding this data. Well, if we're going to spend all this time, we've got to talk about securing the private key. We have to talk about where monetization occurs, because if you have a true open public market, it defeats the need for the black markets where these things are traded illegally. So or monetize it, or put it into some sort of mining program. So there's no immediate money return. So it's not valuable, and that's not fair or correct. I think that will be the next step coming through. How do you secure these things? Because they're of immense value, having identity. And if you play this forward, no doubt banks, in the next 10 years will be accepting credit card applications where instead of, you're putting your passport down or ID, you're providing a digital ID and you're signing it online. If you have one of those, you're getting a credit card in someone's name with probably zero recourse to whomever claims it. The security and the custody around these assets is just as critical as it will be for, who holds their BTC.
No, absolutely. If I may, Vikrant, before you continue. So for me, everything involving DeFi, it's very interesting, and I support everything that happens into this decentralized environment. Exactly what you're saying. People need to understand that there are specific risks involved, because eliminating all these central authorities, all these intermediaries who are actually facilitating functions or whatever roles for us, that means that those roles you should assume. And because of that, people need to understand that the risks involving all this type of value-based assets are huge. And it's not easy. I mean, like we always talk, and people always want to embrace the decentralization, especially from the banking perspective. They don't want to hear about central banks anymore. But what does it mean is that actually eliminating the central bank, you are becoming the bank itself. That means that you need to actually act and protect and assume all the risks that comes with such a process. The risk that actually the central authority was actually fulfilling for you. So I totally agree with this. It's a very interesting environment.
Yeah, I think it's easy to beat up banks, because they have record profits year in, year out, it seems. But exactly what you just said, there's huge compliance departments, teams that are schooled in watching.
There are armies of people.
Transactions, is transaction out of character for this account, all these sorts of things. Those things cost money. Your usual experience is it's a legitimate transaction you did and they're holding it up, and that's irritating. I've been there before. But having worked also in a retail bank at Macquarie, we've seen so many examples of people just trying to steal your money. And of course, in crypto, there's zero recourse. You can see where the assets sit. You can wave at them. You just can't do anything with them. So it's a really poignant element of being in this industry that, and I mean, you said it better than I have, you become the bank. And I think people just go, well, it costs less for me to hold these things. There's a lot of risks involved. And I mean, from a Unido perspective, again, custody around assets and putting smart controls around your assets, this is why it's so critical. I mean, this is why we got into the business. But it's a really, really relevant point, and people don't think about it. They often just think banks charge money. Yeah, they do, but there's a reason. There's a huge expense.
They're bearing that risk.
Infrastructure.
That's true. That's right.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the premium that we're paying for this type of services is the fee that we're paying for the risks they take.
Yep, that's right. Absolutely.
That is exactly, yeah. And obviously, I mean, if you become your own bank and you have to bear the risk, when we are moving towards decentralizing the environment and banking the population, and there's been all sorts of debate about whether Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and other blockchains, they are there to bank the unbanked or unbank the banked. But if you are becoming our own banks, the risk comes back to us. The storage, the settlements, every risk comes back to us, and we have to be responsible for the risk because we're not paying any premiums.
No, I agree with this. If I may continue, I was actually enrolled in a project involving financial inclusion. So financial inclusion is a concept that still actually bothers me, in the sense of we are just trying to optimize a system which actually has already its own flaws. And the way I was looking at it was from the decentralized finance perspective. because into this space, actually, we allow people, there is an open environment for people to access this type of services, and makes perfect sense. So the problem of financial inclusion comes actually to the root of it, which is financial exclusion. The exclusion comes exactly from the banking infrastructures, the banking entities that we were talking about. So DeFi itself presents huge opportunities. It presents a fabulous environment, an open environment for people to join, to interact, to use this type of services. But again, the risks are there, and it's important. This is an important educational aspect that people need to understand. There are operational risks. There are key management risks. There are cryptographic and chain split and forks risk. So there are a lot of factors that need to be considered whenever we are joining this environment. And yeah, we need to educate people. We need to bring more people involved. We need to bring more people that actually can assist in terms of making this experience flawless, because everything what's happening now is quite technical, right? All the applications that are developed into the DeFi environment and into the crypto space itself, they are quite technical. So you need a lot of expertise. Mostly also all of these tools are tools designed by developers for developers. We are missing one key component, which is the user interface, which needs to be like super interesting and super appealing to people. And I think we are getting there, but I think it's just a matter of time and the way things are moving. Either way, it's a very thrilling environment. I love it.
I'm sitting here smiling because that is exactly what Unido EP is. We have a DeFi dashboard where you point and click and you invest, and it does all the key management and the Web3 interaction with the contracts, which, as you know, is a technical exercise. I mean, I've been in crypto a long time, and I've burnt my gas fees, setting them at the wrong and then having to go back. There's a whole technical aspect to these things, and that's part of what we've built. So to everyone at home, Andrei was not paid to say those things. That's a genuine observation.
That's excellent.
And I mean, that's what we see too, right? Blockchain is a technical exercise with immense power, and it's the new usability tools which will make or break blockchain for mainstream integration. That's what that's what Unido EP is about. But it's just interesting hearing your views, and I mean it's hit the nail on the head that it is sort of buyer beware. The technology is there; it's fantastic technology. You absorb a lot of the risks. So it really is in your best interest to educate yourself on what those risks are and to defend your assets, make sure they're secure. We've all heard of the examples, people forget private keys and, the hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, which will float there forever. It's a really, really interesting point. And I don't think it gets said enough. Everyone's very bullish on why crypto is amazing. Well, there should be a time to pause and think about what you're getting involved in, not just the capital appreciation or depreciation of a coin, but the actual realities of holding these things. And then there are the projects such as us that are developing these tools to make things work. And there's lots of different projects that are out there. And that's where, and I guess this touches on my original point of beyond the layer one technologies, the DApps and the interface between the people who use these things and the actual chain need to get smarter and easier to use. And that's what really pushes crypto mainstream. When it's simple and you're sitting there, the click clack of MasterCard now in crypto. And by the time we get to pay waving crypto on a phone, and it's taken up broadly, that's mainstream. That's where we've got to get to. And it's these layer 2 or even layer 3 apps that get us there. If they're usable and they're easy and it helps people mitigate those risks that you've been through, that's what takes crypto mainstream, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah. Coming back to our old point, I mean, so we were discussing about data. And we have already discussed, maybe this is what we call Web3 is. We have an open internet. We have our data. We own that data. And we will decide if that data can be incentivized or monetized. It will not be centralized organizations like we have seen in the case of Cambridge Analytica case, Facebook, Google, etc., who are, as said, to be selling massive chunks of data to organizations and maybe earning money with those data sets. But again, those GDPR laws and, I giving permission to any company to use my data for maybe analytics or maybe driving their sales or anything else in that front. So the ownership of data and how we incentivize participants, and possibly let's see the contribution of NFTs also in this movement. There are like lots of things adding to this to this particular thing, like how we are connecting the physical world to the digital world, and not just the digital world, but to the blockchain world. And that's again where NFTs come into space, and where again we minimize the counterfeiting risk, etc. So what do you think with blockchain and NFTs this movement is heading towards, and what do you see the future of this entire establishment?
Are you asking me, Vikrant?
Yeah, sure. Let's start with
you. Within this evolutionary steps that we are heading in terms of Web3, blockchain, metaverse, we skipped one important business model that we were talking maybe 1 or 2 years ago, which was tokenization, and we are referring to tokenization of real assets, because that's a bridge which is very important in mirroring some part of the traditional world with the metaverse, with the virtual world, right? So the tokenization process, I believe, will be a huge business opportunity for a lot of concepts and businesses and projects. And before we leapfrog to the metaverse, I think people need to actually focus on bridging of uniting this type of environments. We are talking about the real world and the virtual world, right? The crypto asset part actually plays an important role, and NFTs actually bring more than authenticity and confidentiality to this equation. I believe the part where we can use NFTs to mirror, I don't know, some sorts of ownership examples from the traditional finance world, not only finance, the traditional world itself. It's the key point of doing the right transition to this metaverse and the Web 3.0, right? But of course, this takes time, and I believe we need to layer, we need to build the foundation on this type of layers, and blockchain, of course, is helping doing this. And all these discussions about confidentiality, authenticity, integrity, data analytics, sets of data, are very important, and are very important because I believe all of these operations, all this functionality have more sense, and they become more efficient, and they become extremely optimized using blockchain technology. So using this technology to transit from what we have now into the metaverse, into the Web 3.0, it's important. And NFTs will play their role. I believe they will evolve, and they will have an extremely vibrant ecosystem, as they do. I'm quite sure you've seen the latest news about OpenSea, which actually landed a $13.3 billion valuation because of their latest Series C, which is fabulous. And this environment will solve a lot of problems. Will solve problems in terms of IP rights, in terms of royalties, and again, there is another confusion, and I've been witnessing that lately in terms of the people I was talking to that were not so crypto savvy and were not knowing what's happening. They are confusing NFTs now with all these pixeled images of the crypto punks and whatever happened during this evolution. which is somehow
monkeys.
wrong, you know? Yeah, exactly, which is wrong. I mean, like, they all read the news about the picture of a rock, which is sold for whatever obscene amount of money. So again, they always ask me, like, okay, how do you evaluate this kind of things? And it's a very, very tough question, you know? But we need to educate people. We need to inform people that actually non-fungible tokens don't really rely or reflect only on this type of digital artwork or this type of images which are sold for, or movie clips which are sold for hundreds of billions of dollars. No, they're more than that, and they can be associated with real businesses, and they can provide the real solution for the transition, as I was saying, from the real world to a more virtual world, and a world where actually we are safe and where we can authenticate and we can be efficient in terms of the technology which you are using. And of course, it's blockchain. So it's a very powerful and impactful technology, and I love what's happening in an NFT space. But again, we need to inform people, and I believe using this type of vectors of communication, like podcasts, like Zoom meetings, like YouTube videos, it's important to share people the risks involved in using this type of technology, and how they can interact with it. And again, it's not only financial, it's not only pictures of rock and pixeled I don't know, monkeys and things like that. It's more than that. And I believe this ecosystem will evolve rapidly. And because I was saying that, I will let Michael also add on if he wants to say something. But I will have a question for you guys, because thinking of this, I've already formulated a question in terms of how the space will evolve.
So my only comments to that, and I totally agree with what you've laid out, is this is going to be very, especially around tokenization and real world ownership, is going to be regulation and law. You could imagine right now the technology is evolved. If you want to prove the ownership of a car, you could record a VIN number, which is attached to each vehicle globally, into an NFT, I'm sure, and you could prove ownership by being able to sign for the wallet that holds, and prove through a signature that you own the vehicle, for instance. There's an immediate real world use to prove ownership of a vehicle. Will it stand up in court? No, because the vehicles are owned through a central registry, and you need to have the paperwork or have applied. In Australia, when you sell a vehicle, you sign the piece of paper, then you've got to go into your motor registry and go through a range of things, not least pay a fee. So a lot of this is very regulatory centric. The idea of tokenization assets, so the construct is here today. In Australia, they tokenized a bond issuance. The Commonwealth Bank of Australia, the largest bank in Australia, did a boomerang bond several years ago as a trial. The blockchain used to record each bond holder. So this was institutional, where they syndicate the bonds to, 10, 15 people for $1 billion for a benchmark. That was a partial use because it was the settlement mechanism, but it didn't imply that if you owned a token to it, that you owned the bond. At the end of the day, the bond was abstract from blockchain.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is move to a point where regulation observes in a capital structure, for instance, are we going to do away with debt and equity, or is there an ability to tokenize the equity, and is there a direct ownership that if you own the private, that it does away with share certificates and registries? Yep. It's that middle piece that is very interesting, where it's not a utility token, it's a redeemable token that you can redeem for rights in a corporate or the ownership of a property through a trust deed. Those things are regulation dependent. So I think that these sorts of discussions are really important, because conceptually, I think we've all got different versions in our heads of what security tokens can look like. And I'm sure there's hundreds of models, but until we see a sandbox out of, Cayman or BVI or maybe Singapore, it's still quite intellectual, and people are coming up with informal, redeemable tokens for equity, for instance. I don't know how enforceable that is, because at the end of the day, you know, who owns the equity is subject of a central register with a government typically. So seeing the evolution of replacing the settlement of equity with a tokenized system, and then the direct owning of that token means you own X amount of equity, or do you do away with equity or debt or the entire capital structure and hybrids in between, and you simply have vehicles which are tokenized, and the ownership is like owning the trust deed to a property, for instance. If you own all the tokens, you own the house. If you own 90% of them, you own 90% of the house. I think there's a lot of things like that that need to be solved in the regulation space before we can make real gains on the tokenization space. That was my main comment, and I don't think any of us can solve that on this call, given we're in the commercial space. But what we can do is keep the discussion going, keep people informed on what is possible. There's a lot of folks who know about Bitcoin but have never thought about the tokenization of their house or a loan portfolio, or debt instruments issued by large banks, you know, in the country that they live in. These things are not widely discussed outside of people who work in the specific industry. And to push regulation along, it needs to be a mainstream discussion. So I think these are important things to talk about.
Absolutely, I agree. The regulatory framework is a very needed piece of the ecosystem. The only thing I want to add here is that regulators were always at least 2 steps behind of what happened, and that's perfectly fine. The only thing I want to acknowledge and I support is that all the players and all the major institutions that actually evolve in this space of tokenizing things or crypto assets or digital assets actually work hand in hand with the regulators, which is brilliant. And I'm quite sure in the near future we will have a proper framework that can actually satisfy the both sides, because I believe all of us are requesting, are in need of this regulatory framework. So this will come in the near future, I'm quite sure. And I just love the support that everyone in this sector is offering in terms of discussing, in terms of educating and providing all the necessary information to the regulators. It's just brilliant.
Yep, totally agree. What have we got, Vic?
Yeah, I think we have pretty much discussed all the topics, and it was again a very, very informative discussion. And the very basic thing which blockchain is changing is how we establish trust in a trustless environment. We have to trust the financial institutions. We have to trust the major data centers, which are kind of accumulating our data, like our social media websites, like our search engines. We have to trust them that our data is not exploited, our financial privacy is not exploited. But with the open internet, when it is all coming again back to us, with that the risk is also coming back to us, and it is again becoming a very I would say philosophical point of how we establish trust. With blockchain, and blockchain is bringing that reliance, that how the trust is established not just between two humans, but also between human and a machine, a human and a device, and also between two devices, right? So it is again becoming it is the next step to evolution, like how we learn to live with devices, how we learn to trust the devices, how we learn to trust each other, and how the digital ecosystem is built so that the blockchain is bringing that again, the reliance of digital trust. So do you have any points? It will be my last question, like how blockchain is involving this digital trust, and again, what is the future of this digital trust?
Sure, let me start this, and I will answer this, and I will also have a question for you guys, because I'm interested in hearing your opinions. So trust is a very complex concept with time. My payment system, the card system, right? So we are using credit and debit cards nowadays seamlessly, right? We just tap wherever we go for coffee, for cab rides, for whatever, which is perfectly fine. But actually, it took us around 50 years to reach this point. So 50 years, it's actually the amount of time the humanity, the people needed for us to trust this type of payment solutions. So now you are bringing trust in a digital environment. And because we're talking about time, my question for you guys is, do you think is it now the correct time to engage into what's happening now in terms of the Web 3.0, the metaverse? Is it now the correct timing? Because you're also talking, Vikrant, about the social network, Facebook. Facebook, it's a perfect example about perfect timing. Facebook was very successful because it happened in a period of time where internet was just devices adoption that actually helped thrive the social network. Before it, there were a lot of social networks that actually couldn't perform. They didn't have so much, the timing was not correct, right? And because the foundation, the layers needed for it about trust in a digital environment. We're talking about metaverse, we are talking about transport of a virtual realm, right? Is this the correct time for the metaverse? What's your opinion?
Facebook versus, MySpace, for instance, because it was the timing of the customer, or the timing of the product. As Alistair said last week, if you don't pay for the product, you are the product. There was a need for the community to be able to identify with each other. If you look at what's going on in the world today with COVID, great example is in Sydney over New Year's. People were staying away from large areas because they're scared. There is a concern about your physical presence because of a virus, because of a pandemic. So what are the other ways to escape from these things? Now, of course, you've got computer viruses, but we're being COVID specific here. There's an immediate need for people to be able to explore beyond their physical limitations of their house, have identity, have the ability to communicate and socialize and network. But there's also the cynicism we keep saying Facebook, but from centralized interaction marketplaces. I've got a Facebook account, I've got an Instagram account. I'm still aware that they monetize who I am, so I'm very cautious about what I put out there. For places for metaverse, the concept of metaverse, where and you talked about the trust of blockchain. What I like to say instead of trust is dependability. It's code. You can read line by line for each chain what the code is, and it will operate in a certain way under a certain set of circumstances. Dependable. People will continue to live because they're, human, are skeptical that dependability needs to be proven probably over a decade before, the biggest skeptics really jump on. But to your question, we have a dependable way of knowing what you put out there, under what terms you put out, accessible, because you can look up the blockchain. If you're programmer savvy, you can understand what happens with what you put out into the blockchain. So it's not a matter of you stick it on a database, Facebook or someone similar, and it turns out a third-party agent buried in terms and conditions then has the data. If you put it out and it's not encrypted and it's on the blockchain, everyone has your data. So there's a dependability and there's a lack of cynicism of what happens because what happens. Or if you don't, you're not educated to what you're doing. But there isn't a behind the curtains element. It's there to be seen. We're in a point, as I said originally, that folks are wanting to express themselves and to network and to do it in a safe environment. The digital environments make sense given what we live with today. The original question, yes, absolutely, it makes sense to be now. The technology exists, but more importantly, the need exists. There's plenty of technologies out there that are clever as an academic exercise. Bitcoin was 10 years ago. Was there a need for Bitcoin 10 years ago? Well, 12 years ago? No, it was an academic exercise by a mathematician. Is there a need now for unbanked countries in second and third world? Absolutely, because of the need of the people. COVID's a perfect, I mean, it's a horrible thing, but it's a perfect platform for metaverse to jump off. And you can put my theory to test and you go have a look at these metaverses where if you look at how many the base utility token or the NFTs, there's a huge supply, but the speculation around these assets, which is getting people to hoard them, suggests that there's not everyone on this call that probably agrees with my point here. It's broadly understood in the industry that these things are going to be valuable and continue to appreciate because there is a demand, and it's not 1, 2, 5, 10,000 people buying these, it's millions of folks. So as the industry gets more and more acceptance and the belief that you've talked about earlier, that, the trust in the technology that should be there, if you read the code, you know how it works, but the human element, the conditions outside of the technology or the offering are here. They've been here for 2 years. So absolutely, it's the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. That was again very solid final point of this discussion. The trust on the technology, how it is building trust, it is working both ways, and that's what again the part of the evolution. We learn to trust the technology, and the technology helps in building the trust, as I mentioned, between two peers, between two devices, peer to device, etc. All right, I think that calls for the end of today's Unido Talks. Thank you, Andrei, for joining us. Thank you, Michael. It was a very informative discussion again. And
what did I say? Would be 75 minutes for a 30-minute scheduled call.
Yeah, I'm really sorry.
But there's a lot to talk about, right, Vic?
Yeah,
this is such
absolutely
a broad topic to go through.
Absolutely.
We should schedule these things longer because there's so much to talk about. It's such a it's not fleeting. It's such a new and exciting and broad technology, and there's so many adaptations to use. I mean, we'll have a call in a year where we talk about the thing that no one on this call could even imagine we were using it for. And, was it too soon or not? There's so much to talk about just beyond the trading of Bitcoin, that's done to death. We all know about Bitcoin and the trade. It's a new uses, and I love talking about these things. So exciting.
Yeah, like Andrei also mentioned, I mean, we need more of these Zoom calls and these webinars and educators like Andrei and Michael to help people understand the technology. And before they start investing into cryptos, they need to know what they're getting into. And most importantly, the technology, the potential it possesses before they start investing only for the capital appreciation or depreciation. That's where that the future is being built in the technology. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Andrei. It was very great having you with us. If we call for another Unido Talks maybe in the future, where we discuss maybe, let's say, blockchain data authenticity 2.0, I would definitely love to call you again, or for some other topic as well. But yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Likewise, it was a pleasure talking with you guys. Cheers.